Well, there's no other announcements on the floor. I'll turn it over to John Morelli, our program chairman.
Thank you very much, President Ron. Fellow Lions and guests, now, if you notice, in March, I think when Phil called me and said, would you handle the programming for March? I said, sure. And then I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Tuesdays in March. So I hope that the programming for this last month has been enlightening. We've kind of had it moved around a little bit with it. And I decided I wanted to take this last month. Usually we leave one for business, but I've been told to kind of fill it. And so I decided I would take a moment and do a couple of things. Share a little perspective on the Columbia Theater, on kind of where it is, where it has been, and where I think it's going. But I really want to just take a few moments to state some points, and then I would love to leave it open for questions, because there's so many questions about the Columbia Theater, about how it operates, about where it fits in our community. And I want to just give you some time to ask questions, and I'll take any and all that come to me for that. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to do this today. This retrospective on the Columbia Theater, as I said, is what it was for many years, what it is now, and what we hope it will become. I'd like to dispel some myths, perhaps, and perhaps doing that in the midst of questions as to how we do it and how we make it happen, which is, quite frankly, in our board and my perspective, a miracle at times that we do it. I've been doing it for 30-some years. And then I hope I can answer the questions that you have. Starting May 1st, I had this up. Starting May 1st, I will begin my 9th year at the Columbia Theater. I'm 9th year and 25 pounds later. We'll say that much about it for what it does. And during that time period, we've gone through a renovation. We've gone through a recession and a demographic shift in our community, unlike any that we've seen in a long time. I think we know that in every aspect of all the volunteer activities that go on, how that has shifted. And there's great promise in our community for the future, and I think for where the Columbia is going. That fundamental shift, there's also been a very fundamental shift in the way we all use our performing arts, or how we go and see performances and how we attend events. And that's been a great challenge for the Columbia Theater. When I arrived here in 2007, and I walked in, there were two things I saw. Number one, which Tom Monahan will appreciate, because I know you appreciate it, because you know I'm a big Buckeye. I was driving around the west side after I was interviewing the very first time I'd been in Longview, and I was driving up and down the streets just to get a sense of what was going on. And I picked up my cell phone, called my wife, and said, I've seen a sign from God. And Tom, you would appreciate this, as I looked down the street on this place I'd never been before. There, anybody know John Barlow?
Yep.
Okay, well there it was. The largest Ohio State flag I've ever seen. And I said, there's a sign from God. That's why we have to move out here.
It was the only other guy in town.
No, you'd be surprised at how many there are now. You can walk into Walmart and run into people there. So that's what we'll say about that. That's it. And tell me none of you go to Walmart. Tell me none of you go to Walmart. Anyway, when I first got here in 2007, and I looked at the Columbia Theater, I was just amazed. The amount of activity that was going on there. You had the Southwest Washington Symphony. You had the community concerts, 4 of those going on a year. You had the LCC choir concerts going on, the LCC theater performances going on there. You had Stageworks Northwest, or Stageworks at the time, and on top of that you had the Columbia Theater performances, about 22 of those a year. And it was a hub of activity. And we came in, started working on a renovation, putting that together, and what happened is what we would all might expect to happen. In a community our size, to have one theater with a lot of, who's that? Who needs to be fined? Anyway, to have one theater, one 800-seat theater or 1,000-seat theater in a community our size is rare, because you don't find them almost anywhere in the country. To have now, as we've turned out, Two, one at 500 seats, one at 800 seats, plus 2 other smaller theaters, has really given us kind of a glut of performing spaces in our community. Now, we could look at that as a negative, but I'm going to ask you to suspend that for a moment. We'll look at it ultimately as a positive on it. But when I came in, we had all of those activities, plus the rentals that went on at the Columbia Theater. Over time, all of that's kind of dispelled. The symphony has gone to a really wonderful space over at the Rose Center, which is acoustic space, works better for them. Community Concerts has moved over there too, under the auspices of that. Stageworks Northwest lost a home because of what we had to do with the renovation and that space there. And then that left us all kind of scrambling and looking to where we want to go, and ultimately finding out where we belong. And also looking at a community that was getting older, a lot of people retiring, a lot of people due to the recession, a lot of younger people moving away. So we have this kind of flux going on over the last few years. So I can't tell you that bottle of Tums, or big jar of Tums that I had sitting on my desk for the last couple of years, somebody gave it to me as a joke. They got it at Costco. Once, a big jar of Tums. And I left it sit there for years. It really did get used quite well for many things. But we now have 4 theater spaces in the Columbia, in our community. In a community that normally would barely have 1. So we have to ask ourselves, what do we do with all of those theater spaces? What do you do with 4 theaters in a community our size? Well, that is the question we have today. And rather look at the history and see how we got here, we have got to look at this from a different perspective. And one of those perspectives is we have 4 assets that no other community in the Pacific Northwest has. And I will assure you that the Columbia Theater, especially as we've added now nearly $100,000 of sound, new sound in the theater itself, we have only four of the finest 800-seat theaters in the Pacific Northwest, sitting right here across the street from us. So what we need to do, and what we had decided we needed to do, is take a look at where our programming was going and what we had to do to reach out and change the way that we do our business. So we have taken that on. We're looking at it hard. I will tell you that it was about a year ago, I looked at the board, we looked at our finances, and we said, you know what? The model doesn't work. It never has worked, but we've got to find a way to make it work. And that's why we've embarked upon a whole new world. We've struggled for 30 years to try and make the thing work. And we're now looking at new ways to do that. And part of that, one of the major ways of doing that, is the kind of programming that we offer and some of the things that we're doing. We changed. We no longer have the same kind of relationship with the schools. That used to be a little easier to work with the schools, but quite frankly, with all of the demands on testing and on teachers, even the elementary school levels find it very difficult to come into the theater very often. So we said, how do we shift that? We started a series called the Rainy Month Series on Sunday afternoons. It was very popular, and it's a Fiber Federal Credit Union Rainy Month Series now, because of their sponsorship of it. And it's a very popular series. It reaches our 3 to 9-year-olds. Our main stage season, the 8, 9, or 10, really 9 or 10 performances that we do a year, are meant for the national, international artists that we can bring in and do some very popular things. And we've had a very, very good season so far this year. We hope that the last 2 shows will prove that out the same way. So we have that main stage season, which reaches way beyond the boundaries of our community and boundaries of Cowlitz County. We are drawing more and more people from outside of Cowlitz County, which gives us another problem, because what we have and like to see here in our community is not always what the community on the outside, what people will want to travel to see. So we always have this balancing act between some of the performances that we do. We started a thing called Third Fridays this last year. On a whim, rolled the dice and said, what happens if we get and celebrate all of the local businesses and partner with doing some microbrews and some things like that, and bring those to the Columbia Theater and try and do a whole series for younger people. $15 to get in, have some fun. We did everything from a drag cabaret to comedians to these microbrews, and we now are actually, our last one, which is coming up on April 17th, is 2 comedians out of Seattle that we're bringing in. So we're turning our Third Fridays, after experimenting a little bit this year, our Third Fridays next year, there'll be 6 or 8 of those, and they will all be basically comedy, stand-up comedy, and microbrew night, so that we have a really nice event to say, if you want to come and see that, it fits a certain demographic, certain age. All of us could enjoy it, but there's certainly a younger group of people that can afford to come in and make it affordable. We've, of course, I mentioned our Rainy Month series, mentioned our Main State series, and we're looking at some other things too. We're looking at a classic film series, which we tested in December. I've kind of run into some interesting points with having to pay royalties, how you pay the royalties for classic films, and so that takes a little more paperwork. But next year we will introduce a classic film series. Very popular test in December, and it looks like that we're going to be adding those, so that we hope that there's always something that you can look at and say, this would be a great thing to try. It'd be fun, maybe a little nostalgia. When we did our classic film series, we had a very surprisingly young audience. It was in its 40s. I know that doesn't sound young to a lot of you guys, but I'm an old guy now. But to have that kind of a response of people, 150, 160 people coming out to see a classic film on a wide screen, wider than any screen they've seen in many years, is really quite an extraordinary experience to have. We had a lot of people go for those things. So those are the fundamental changes. We're changing the way we do the kind of programming we do. We did a blues and barbecue this year. We will bring back more blues. We're reaching into Portland and pulling up more regional artists, and one of the reasons for that is there's always several reasons why you do things. One of the reasons we'll reach for those regional artists is they have Facebook pages. We tried when we reopened the theater to reach deeply into Vancouver, because we knew that you could not just operate this theater out of what was in Cowlitz County. So we spent, I won't say a huge, actually a modest amount of money by any stretch of the imagination, but pretty significant for us. And although we saw some response, it was nowhere near what our Facebook does now. And 8 years ago, 7 years ago, 5 years ago, when we reopened the theater, Facebook was not as commercial friendly as it is now, and we're having huge success. We have a very big presence on our Facebook page, which really reaches way beyond our borders, and we're seeing more and more people come up for particular shows that they want to see at the Columbia Theater that they will not see in the Portland area or in Vancouver. So we're having some great success. But one of the problems that the Columbia Theater has is, in many respects, the way, as I mentioned, that model operates. Number one thing, a small nonprofit operating a 22,000 square foot facility 365 days a year is a big chunk of change. And it's something that when you could turn off the lights and put a ghost light out, turn the heat off, and walk away, that could suffice. But to have a state-of-the-art facility like we have, that people are very, very excited when they walk through, demands that there's a certain amount of cost. And the Columbia Theater Association bears that cost. There is a public facilities district which has the lease. The city of Longview owns the building, and then the Columbia Theater Association is charged with operating and maintaining it. And that's become a little bit of a problem for us. It's become kind of a drag because it affects our programming. Over the last 8 years, we have, along with the recession, a lot of other businesses have had to draw down and shrink our organization. We're operating at about $150,000 less a year than when I got here. And it's been a challenge. But the kind of programming we're doing, the new things we're looking for, the way we're reaching out, I think is going to be a huge, we really feel some traction for the Columbia Theater that's coming along in the future. And I hope that you will feel it too if you've been to the theater lately or start coming to it. So in many respects, what I wanted to share with you is we have seen a day, and when we are looking at and are always worrying about the good news about the Columbia Theater is that financially, even though we struggle, we know where all our money is. We know how much we're struggling. We have very clean audits. We're a very, very well-run organization from that perspective. It may be running the fuel mixture may be a little bit too thin to run this engine, and we've got to find a way to fill that back out. We've been very fortunate. We raise about a little over $350,000 a year flows into the Columbia Theater in gifts from this community, either through our gala, through different events that we're doing, through our sponsorships, and those are the things that make it possible, because ticket revenue only covers about 30% of our entire operating event, and we're about where everybody else is in the country. So there's so many different ways that we look at the financing of it. We're pleased and proud of the kind of new programming we're doing. We're proud and of the kind of response we're getting now to it. And that's where I think we are going to ultimately see our success. I would like to just kind of slow it down here because this is almost, any of you guys remember Mr. Spock, remember when you were kids? I guess when we were all kids. Geez, when we were kids. Got that three-dimensional chess game. Somebody gave me one for Christmas once. Spock played a three-dimensional chess game. And it was a game, and they actually put it out on a board game, and you could buy it. I never could ever use it, but it had 3 little lanes on it. And what we're doing, running the Columbia Theater is like playing a three-dimensional chess game. There's a lot of different ways that you reach it, and a lot of different questions that can come out about how we operate it. And it's a very interesting place to be. We've got a very dedicated staff and a really terrific board of directors that are trying very hard to make this happen. And we're going to get through this year pretty well. We're going to be in good shape when we get through this year. But it's always going to be a struggle. And I thought I would share with you where we've been, where we're going, and then open it up and see if you've got questions for me that can help us lead in new directions. So I'm finished with my remarks. I would hope you have questions. Please have questions. Oh, thank you.
The brew things that you have, is that like a tasting thing? Are there a lot of different microbrews there? Or is it just a microbrew that people buy and take into to watch the show?
Yeah, the original idea was to do these little tastings, and you could buy flights and see them. And we worked with Ashtown, then we worked with Five Dons, and we were going to do what we called a brew on April 17th, and I realized that the first 2 were fine, and this is how you test when you say we're going to do this third Fridays. When we limited those to about 40 or 45 people, and realized that what we really needed to do was to open it up and change and readjust how we're marketing third Fridays. And when we had a comedy night, and it was very successful with bringing people in from Portland, and we had a drag cabaret which did very, very well, that's when we decided that we needed to lean toward comedy. So this last one we do will include Five Dons, be able to come in and buy Five Dons Brewing, Ashtown, and Drop Anchor, which is out in Cathlamet. And then we're going to also offer Roland Wines. One of the ways we do this is how can we economically highlight the activities and the entertainment things that are going on right here, and that includes the microbreweries that are here. So how do we support each other? Has been it. So it's this last time around it's going to be come on in, buy your ticket, choose the beer that you want, but it's not going to be flights this time around. As it's evolved over the last year, this one we're doing on April 17th is the first of what we're going to be doing over the next year, and hope it's going to be very successful. Once again, as we draw more people from out of town to this, and it's not huge numbers right now, but as we draw more and more people from out of town, these kinds of things, say, come to our downtown. What's happened in the first few blocks of the downtown in this last year has made a world of difference. You could not see the Columbia Theater's 50-foot high sign from down the street this time last year. Now you can see it all the way down to Clary, all the way down to the Chevy dealership. And I think those are the things that are making the feel of breathing, feel it's a little easier, it's more open, is going to make it a great deal of success for the Columbia. Yes, Cindy.
Do you advertise for that? Because I'm listening to this and I think that's something that Jim and I would be interested in knowing, especially since you're going to have some wine and beer. I haven't seen any advertising.
Well, there's a reason for that. Number one, it's we do that mostly online. We do have posters that should be out there. Marketing is my second largest cost for every show that I do. When we do a show, we're extended out about $25,000 every show that we do, and that's if you want to get in a safer business, buy a restaurant. For that, but we haven't. But you'll be seeing more and more of it. We usually do a lot of it online, and as we're working with the distributor for the breweries, they're going to help us put that out there and get the word out about it.
Willing to put a sign up at the shop.
I will get one over to you. In fact, I'll give you the one I have here. Okay, yeah, Tom.
You said you have 2 more performances this week.
Yeah,
Where are they? And
thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, I'll pay you later for that. We are doing 2 more shows this year in our mainstay season. We have a Rainy Month series. We're really kind of winding down and getting ready for next year. In fact, I'm going to spend the rest of the week putting next year's season together, which I think is going to resonate really well with everyone here. The season I chose this last year included people like Colin Ray. It included the musicals that we were doing. You can't always get a musical coming through that you need. So one of the things that we're doing, any of you, I love to do this, any of you have this album? You can't read that far. You would recognize it just looking at it. It was the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, 1972. This is my copy. I dug it out of my vinyl. And it's called Will the Circle Be Unbroken? And that was John McEwen, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, and John Carter Cash are going to be here. That was this album is in the Smithsonian, this recording, because they left Southern California, kind of went to the hippies, went to Nashville, recorded with the likes of Mother Maybelle Carter, Merle Travis, Doc Watson, all of these old country stars out of the 30s and 40s who had basically been forgotten, and did this entire album. And it's a three record set on this album. And they're coming to the Columbia Theater. John Carter Cash, yes, John and June Carter's son, are going to be here on the 18th, and they're going to be doing this retrospect. It covers the old country music, bluegrass, American roots music, all of this. And it was a seminal album when it came out, and we're hoping that we're seeing some heavy, very, very good sales for it. They're only going to be here, as I bought the exclusive on that one because I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to make sure that our community knows about it. So the first thing coming up on the 18th is Will the Circle Be Unbroken with John Carter Cash and John McEwen, who's a founding member of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, and it's a whole multimedia retrospect on those sessions, very seminal sessions in 1970. It was really what brought country and rock together as they worked together. And you hear all of the dialogue. They had a tape that ran for the entire 7 days, capturing all of the discussions that were going on in the background between all of these guys. And that's why it made it into the Smithsonian. And I think that's going to be a great show to have here. If you love country music, old country music, then I think you're going to want to be here for this one. And of course it ends with that rousing chorus of Will the Circle Be Unbroken, which everybody will get to sing. So we'll have that one be in there. So that's the first one. The other one is the Harry James Orchestra, which is coming up on May 10th, and that's Mother's Day. Every mom gets a flower for that. Harry James is the only big band that still has a direct line back to the founder, because Fred Radke still runs the band and was Harry James' lead trumpeter back in the 80s, just before for about 20 years there in the 70s and 80s. So that's what's going on there. We have our Rainy Month series, which is a Lewis and Clark thing, and we have our Third Fridays. Then we get into recital season. We have lots and lots of recitals and lots of rentals that are coming up. And even this Thursday, we have Love and Theft, our partnership with Cook and Country. So we're doing more and more partnerships, more and more connecting with people to see if we can to find a way to get this theater rented more and more often, not only locally, but out of town. Yes?
I just want to make sure that everybody's really clear of how helpful the Columbia Theater was with Cabaret. It was so super helpful. And I look at it from the time before, when I was half the chairman. Yeah.
Half the chairman.
I was 4 foot tall that day. And the staff, everybody, it just all made it come together. And if that hadn't happened, neither one of us would have been happy. So, and I've been asking John for some time to say, the Pioneer Lions should find another fundraiser.
It would be great if the Pioneer Lions would find another fundraiser, dude.
There's something we can do with the Columbia Theater because it's a gem. It's a gem of the city. It's one of the most beautiful. No, but a different project.
No.
Not different. the CEP, we ask that question because I think it's the right thing to do.
I appreciate that. I just want to mention one more thing. When we went through this project, as we've gone through this whole evolution of finding out where we are, some of the questions we had to ask was how do we make these things happen? And one of the things that has kind of given a breath of fresh air to the Columbia Theater is we have reduced our rentals so that we can get more and more people into the theater, even though that's initially kind of a strain on us. It's important that people understand what it's there for. But secondarily, one of the reasons we were able to open the doors now even more often is directly related to the fact that we put $100,000 of sound into the system. So nobody has to rent that theater sound anymore. It's there to be used. And that's why we ultimately want to make sure that everybody understands we're a community resource. And we hope that we're going to have a lot of people who step up and use it for all kinds of purposes. That we hope. So I want to thank you for the time you've taken to listen to me, and I'll take any other questions after the meeting. Thanks. Bye-bye.
John, you have the pioneer line. I want to take you to this here mug.
I'm collecting them.
Good, all right.
Stand over here so I don't get